Folks, welcome back to another episode of Coffee, Tea, and Crime. Today's episode, Conspiracy to Murder. Folks, regarding our story today, the Wyoming Supreme Court said that the facts of this case present one of the most bizarre stories in the judicial history of the state of Wyoming. Now, this story is going to involve the death of 4 people, numerous injuries, threats, blackmail, and attempted bombings. Now, the main culprit in all this, he was born and raised there in Bridger Valley, Wyoming. Now, it started out good for him. He got a football scholarship to the University of Arizona, somewhere around late 60s or so. But now while he's off at school, he gets popped for a delivering controlled substance charge in 1971. So he does a little time in federal prison. So he shows up back home. Now he's not back there long before trouble seems to pop up. Him and his daddy get involved in all kinds of shenanigans. Now, most of the problems the suspect seems to have is with an attorney named Vincent Vehar. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And our suspect, unfortunately, is not a good sport, nor a good loser. Now, the first of these disputes involved a fight over water rights between the suspect and another family. Well, without getting too deep into it, it's regarding the daddy's wanting to build a trailer court RV park set up, and he wants to get water hookups for each of the sites, each of the campsites, I guess you'd call them. So now they go to the Fort Bridger Sewer and Water Board, and they say, hey, we want to connect to the district's water, but we only want to pay the $100 charge for the initial hookup fee. Well, now it turns out now Mr. Vehar also represents the Sewer and Water Board. Now, the dispute came up in all this over the fee, because there's going to be multiple hookups. So the board, they have public meetings and whatnot about what they should charge for the hookups for this RV park, this trailer court. So they have these negotiations between the suspect's attorney and the district's attorney, who's Mr. Vehar. So they come up with a contract on March 13th, 1976. Contract signed, and the hookup fee is going to be $300 per trailer or per spot. Alright, so all the hookups are completed for all the sites. He turns around and tells the board, well, I'm not paying the contract price. I changed my mind. So now, as you might guess, the board is trying to figure out ways to make the suspect pay the money he owes. Well, the suspect, he figures to help his cause, he threatened several members of the board. In fact, some of the board's members end up receiving injuries from physical altercations. So the board files a suit January 28, 1977. The same attorney, Mr. Vehar, they sue the suspect. So this suit's going to force the suspect to pay the money he owes under the contract and $50,000 in what they call exemplary damages because of the threats made against the board member. Now, April of 77, one of the suspect's buddies, he gets stopped there in Colville, Utah. Now, he's driving the suspect's car, and he's speeding. Well, the speeding part isn't too bad. I'm sure the Utah Highway Patrol was just going to write him a ticket. But sitting on the back seat of that car was an explosive device. Well, Utah doesn't appreciate you bringing a bomb through their state, so the suspect's buddy, a fella named Green, he gets arrested. Well, now the suspect, him and one of his other partners in crime, they head off to Utah, bail old Green out of jail, and they head back to Wyoming. Well, of course, that suit against the suspect is still ongoing, so he's got to deal with that problem too. Now, that bomb, was intended for someone connected to the attorney, Mr. Vehar, on another matter. But he's got to deal with this lawsuit from the Water and Sewer Board. That's in August of 1977. Now that deposition he's going to have to give to Mr. Vehar, that's due on August the 9th. Well, August the 6th, he sees another one of his buddies, gets with him, and he says, look, you're going to have to take care of this Mr. Vehar. So this fella named Hickey, he says, all right. They'd already scoped out Mr. Vehar's house. He lived there in Evanston, Wyoming, just down the highway there from Fort Bridger. Well, so he's got the bomb. It's 30 sticks of dynamite. But he goes to the bar first and he drinks and gets pretty drunk. Well, August the 6th turns into August the 7th there early in the morning. So he drives on to Evanston. Now, while he's motoring down the interstate, a highway patrolman remembers seeing that car and this fella because he's working an accident there on the interstate. So the suspect's buddy here, he gets over to the Mr. Vehar's house there and he puts that 30-stick explosive device through a window into the basement of the home. Now, Mr. Vehar is at home, his wife's there, both of his sons. So about 20 minutes or so after he's put the bomb inside the basement, it blows up, levels the house. Now it kills Mr. Vehar, kills his wife, and kills one of his sons. And the other son, he survived. Now the odd thing, this fellow that did the bombing, he stopped on his way back to Fort Bridger and picked up a hitchhiker. As you might guess, one of the witnesses to testify in the later murder trial is going to be that hitchhiker. And he gives them a time frame about where he was at and what time this fella picked him up. So this is all going to come back to haunt the suspect and all his little buddies. Well, now in March of 79, the suspect and some of his buddies are having to go to federal court, face the charges over that bomb that was in the car of that fella Green. So you got Green, that fella named Hickey, and then our suspect. Well, the only one that goes to prison over it is our suspect. Now he goes to California. They put him in a prison, I believe it's called Lompoc Prison. And if I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sure by now you are used to that. So now the suspect's out there in the pokey and he's kind of upset. Because what the suspect's upset about is this fella Green, he ends up cutting the deal and he testifies at the trial against the suspect and the other fella. So as you might guess, Mr. Green, he's in trouble. So while he's in prison, he makes what the authorities would later estimate to be 114 phone calls from the prison phones, setting up deals, getting money lined up. Has a fella come to see him there in prison, one of his old buddies, because now, you see, they worried about Mr. Green because of that killing of Mr. Vehar and his wife and the son. And they figure Green's going to roll over on that too. So they know they got to do something about Mr. Green quickly. So now, on the Friday, so a few days before Mr. Green's supposed to appear there in front of the grand jury to give testimony about the killing of Mr. Vehar and his wife and son, some men show up around Mr. Green's house, his mama's house, asking where Jeff's at. Well, the mama says, well, he ain't here, he's off somewhere. Okay, well, they leave. Well, they come back again. And they ask again about Mr. Green. Well, they finally show up one morning because they run out of time now. They ain't got but about a day or two. Green's going to testify and then the suspect's going to be done for. Well, they finally locate him, sleeping out in the little house there behind the main house. Mama says last time she saw her son, he was walking with those two fellas. Now they got into a little pickup truck, had a little camper top on the back. Now later on it would be said that that pickup truck looked like a pickup truck owned by a fella from Salt Lake City who was a big-time gambler and was known to dabble in dirty deeds. And all the mama could say about that truck was it was a foreign light pickup truck. Had an orange stripe around it. Now that was the morning of the 18th of May. Now 2 days later, Green's body is found. Now it was found there off of I-80 at a rest stop there in the southwest part of Wyoming. It was obvious that the victim had been tortured. Now the medical examiner went on to say that this torture would have taken hours. Now he estimated it was 30 or 40 deaths resulting from torture that he'd seen over his career. And he said he had never seen a body so extensively tortured as this victim. Now, he went on to say there's no way two men could have held this fella down and inflicted such wounds on him, so that he obviously had to have been tied down. And folks, there is, in the resource material, it goes into great detail as to the injuries. I'm not even going to go into it here. Besides, if I had to read off what the medical examiner said happened to the victim, I imagine YouTube would zing me for talking about such stuff. But it is a pretty horrible manner of death. Well, the suspect figures he's got it made now that he's bumped off the main man against him. Well, another one of his buddies breaks in 1979 in May, and he spills the beans. So now the suspect, he's facing 4 counts of murder. So our suspect, he gets 3 consecutive life imprisonment terms for the killing of Mr. Vehar and his wife and son. But now the jury, they give him the death penalty for that Green fella's death. But now there was actually a deal on the table. All the suspect had to do was say, yep, I was involved in that killing. I'm the one that paid for that killing. Now, if he'd have done that, he'd got another life term. He wouldn't have been given a death sentence. But he rolled the dice and he lost, because he sure got that death sentence. And about 13 years later, 1992, January 22nd to be exact, the suspect was executed in a Wyoming state penitentiary. And I believe that's the last execution carried out in Wyoming.